Have you ever noticed that heaviness that seems to follow you around these days? That feeling of unease that settles in during quiet moments? Many blame it on aging bodies or changing times. But what if that weight isn't coming from your joints or the world outside? What if it's coming from four silent enemies you've been carrying for years? Enemies so quiet, so patient, that you've forgotten they're even there. These forces don't announce themselves. They don't attack all at once. Instead, they slowly drain the joy from your days, the connection from your relationships, and the purpose from your life. Today, I want to help you name them, because when we name our enemies, they begin to lose their power over us. Enemy 1, resentment. The poison you drink while hoping someone else will suffer. Resentment begins so innocently. A slight that was never addressed, a hurt that was never healed, a recognition that never came. Decades ago, perhaps, someone did something unforgivable. Or maybe they simply failed to do something essential. And that moment, that wound, became a story you couldn't stop telling yourself. The painful truth about resentment is that it promises justice, but delivers only isolation. It promises to protect your dignity, but slowly erode your capacity for joy. It's a poison that affects only one person, the one who carries it. Margaret is 67 now. For 23 years, she's carried the weight of her sister's betrayal. She took my mother's side in everything, even when Mom was clearly wrong, Margaret explains, her voice still tight with emotion. When Mom was sick, my sister moved in and shut me out. Mom changed her will that year. In her living room filled with photographs of grandchildren and travel souvenirs, Margaret falls silent for a moment. I miss my sister. I miss having family. But every time I think about reaching out, I remember what she did. The tragedy isn't just that Margaret lost her mother and sister. It's that every day, resentment steals a little more of her present happiness, her future possibilities. The betrayal happened once. The resentment happens every single day. If there's a name or a memory that still makes your jaw clench after all these years, if there's a story of hurt you've told yourself 1,000 times, resentment might be living inside you, stealing your peace one day at a time. Enemy 2, stagnation, the quiet death of curiosity and growth. The second enemy works differently than the first. Where resentment burns, stagnation slowly freezes your spirit. It doesn't hurt, at least not at first. In fact, it often feels like well-deserved rest after decades of effort. I've earned the right to sit back now, we tell ourselves. I've done enough learning, enough striving. But the human spirit was never designed for prolonged stillness. When we stop learning, stop growing, stop challenging ourselves in even small ways, something essential begins to wither. Stagnation isn't really rest. It's surrender, not to peace, but to a slow diminishing of what makes us feel most alive. Robert taught high school English for 42 years. Reading was his passion, discussing ideas his joy. But in the 5 years since retirement, his bookshelf has gathered dust. His subscription to the literary journal he loved sits unopened in its plastic wrapper. I'll get to it eventually, he says, though his days are filled with the same routine. Coffee, newspaper, television, nap, dinner, more television, sleep, repeat. His wife notices how his conversations have narrowed, how the spark in his eyes has dimmed, how he seems perpetually disappointed but can't name why. The enemy isn't boredom exactly. It's the absence of challenge, the missing sense of becoming something new. I'm too old to start anything new, he says, when she suggests a community class. But the truth is, he's too stagnant to remember how it feels to begin. If your days have started to blur together, if you've stopped seeking new experiences or perspectives, if the thought of learning something new feels exhausting rather than exciting, stagnation might be quietly freezing your spirit, stealing the vitality that makes peace possible. But what comes next might be the one hiding behind what you've always considered your greatest strength. If any of this feels familiar so far, consider subscribing. Around here, we talk about the parts of aging no one else seems to discuss. Enemy 3, isolation, the wall that becomes a prison. The third enemy often arrives disguised as independence. It whispers that you don't need others the way you once did, that relationships are too complicated, too draining, that it's easier, safer to keep to yourself. Isolation doesn't happen suddenly. It accumulates, one declined invitation at a time, one unreturned call, one day spent entirely alone that stretches into weeks and months of minimal human contact. What makes isolation so dangerous is that it creates its own reality. The less we connect, the more awkward connection feels. The more we withdraw, the more intimidating the outside world becomes. And all the while, something fundamental to human flourishing slowly suffocates. Eleanor prided herself on her self-sufficiency. After her husband died 6 years ago, she was determined not to become a burden on her children or friends. "I'm fine on my own," became her mantra. She maintained her home perfectly. She handled her finances impeccably. But gradually, her world contracted. The weekly lunches with friends dwindled to monthly, then quarterly, then stopped. She found reasons not to attend family gatherings. The drive was too long, she didn't want to impose. When her daughter Sarah visits now, she notices how her mother jumps at small sounds, how she seems uncomfortable with conversation lasting more than a few minutes, how a once confident woman now seems anxious about simple interactions with the grocery clerk or neighbor. "Mom," Sarah asked gently one afternoon, "are you lonely?" "Of course not," Eleanor answered quickly. "I have everything I need." But that night, after Sarah left, Eleanor stood in her immaculate, silent kitchen and wept for the first time in years. If you find yourself speaking to fewer people each day, if you've convinced yourself that relationships are more trouble than they're worth, if your independence has become a point of stubborn pride, isolation might be building walls between you and the connection that creates true peace. And the last one? It may be the hardest to admit and the most powerful to overcome. If stagnation is something you've felt in your life, type that word below. You're not alone. Enemy 4. Pride, the shield that blocks grace and connection. The final enemy hides behind a noble appearance. Pride disguises itself as dignity, as principle, as strength. It tells you that asking for help is weakness, that admitting error is shame, that vulnerability is danger. Pride is particularly insidious because it's often rooted in very real strength, the same resilience and self-reliance that carried you through decades of life's challenges. But what serves us in one season can harm us in another. In our later years, pride becomes a wall that keeps out not just hurt, but healing, not just judgment, but joy, not just intrusion, but intimacy. James built a successful construction business from nothing. For 40 years, he was the one with answers, the one who fixed problems, the one who never showed doubt. When a stroke at 72 left him needing a cane and sometimes struggling for words, his pride suffered more than his body. He refused his son's suggestion to see a speech therapist. "Nothing wrong with how I talk," he insisted, though conversations had become an exercise in frustration. He rejected his daughter's invitation to move closer to family. "Don't need babysitters," he said, though loneliness enveloped him like a fog. When his grandson offered to help repair the sagging front steps, James sent him away. "I'll get to it," he said. The steps remained broken, and James began using the back door exclusively rather than accept help. One evening, attempting to carry groceries while managing his cane, James fell. He lay on the kitchen floor for hours before the neighbor happened to check on him. In the hospital, his family gathered, concern etched on their faces. "Dad," his daughter said, holding his hand, "we don't want to take over your life. We just want to be part of it. Letting us help isn't weakness, it's trust." For the first time in years, James felt something shift inside him, a willingness to consider that perhaps true strength includes knowing when to let others in. If you've refused help you genuinely needed, if you've let opportunities for healing pass because accepting them felt like admitting defeat, if your need to appear strong has left you struggling alone, pride might be standing between you and the peace that comes from authentic connection. If pride has kept you from receiving love or help, write that word below. Your courage in naming it might help someone else feel seen. These 4 enemies, resentment, isolation, and pride, don't arrive with fanfare. They slip in quietly during transitions, during losses, during the natural shifts that come with age. What makes them so dangerous is their silence. We often don't recognize their presence until they've already claimed significant territory in our lives. But here's the truth that changes everything. Naming these enemies is the first step to defeating them. When you recognize resentment, you can begin to question the story it tells you. You can consider the possibility of forgiveness, not for the other person's sake, but for your own freedom. When you identify stagnation, you can introduce one small challenge, one new learning, one fresh perspective that cracks the ice and allows vitality to flow again. When you acknowledge isolation, you can take one small step toward reconnect. One call, one visit, one honest conversation about how you really feel. And when you confront pride, you open yourself to the profound grace that comes with acknowledging your humanity, our need for others, your capacity for growth even through imperfection. These enemies may have stolen years of your peace, but they don't have to claim a single day more. Your story isn't finished. The wisdom you've earned through decades of living makes you more equipped than ever to face these enemies with courage and clarity. The peace that awaits on the other side, the peace that comes from letting go, growing, connecting, and receiving, is deeper and more authentic than anything these enemies promise to provide. If this helped you name what's been silently stealing your peace, the next one might help you rebuild it, one habit at a time. Look for "do these 3 things daily after 65, and you'll likely live past 90."